Vinci.
This is Da
I
Vinci.
think
Very
it's, I
good.
think it's Da Vinci.
Way to go on the first slide. No one ever gets it on the first slide. So that was awesome. Thanks, John. This is Leonardo da Vinci. And I don't like to show art and go, oh, we're going to copy an artist, right? I like to use artists to kind of teach you basic skills. And so what I want to do is to kind of just look at this artwork and understand why I chose this one, okay? So I have, sorry, I'm fiddling with my video because for some reason it's, there we go. So normally people don't get it here. Sometimes they get it here and then they do it here. And the reason I chose Leonardo is that I call him a master of composition, because a lot of artists before Leonardo would always just put things like dead center in a painting, and they didn't really think about the arrangement. It was very formal and orderly. And Leonardo started to think about, how can I get the viewer to interact with the painting, okay? So what I want to do is just look at this for a second. Can you guys see any ways that Leonardo forces your eye to move around the composition? So when you look at the painting, is there anything that he did to intentionally force you to look at these different characters? Anyone have any examples?
I think there's something, it's kind of like, it's a certain thing of composition. It's like a triangle form.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, in different artworks, there's like a triangle of any sort really in it that kind of keeps the composition going. So in this one, it's like the female in the middle goes down to the child on her left, and then it goes across to the other woman and the children on the right, and then back to her. So that's like a triangle, and then everything else kind of like revolves around it.
Exactly, you got it spot on. That's awesome. This is called a triangle composition. And so we can use this triangle composition to arrange our toys to force our eyes to move around. So one, he put people in the shape of a triangle. So we've got this religious image, right? And so we have a Mary in the middle, and then she is doing something besides just being in the middle. Can you guys see her arms? Can you see how her arms are basically leading you to the next person? You guys see that? Is there anything else besides her arms that leads you to the next person?
It's like how her head is kind of turned downwards to the child.
Exactly. So you can make people look at things through like tilting the head, or even like where your eyes are looking. And there's obviously other physical things, like there's literally pointing of limbs and fingers in this composition. And so I have my toy, I have this gigantic fly that I've been using for a number of years, and I can point him, and if I point him in a certain direction, your eye is going to travel with him. And so we're going to be able to organize and to change the body postures and positions to force your eye to move around the image. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start taking our notes. So what I want to make sure that you know is the notes are going to be photographs, so you need to take them. So you are going to put them in your sketchbook. I have a photo of them. So like I said, if I go too fast, you are welcome to copy them from my agenda page. The first thing I want you guys to know, that when we're not practicing and we are making art, we are always going to make compositional, like we're going to make compositions. So what that means is that we're going to be intentionally arranging to create particular effects. Focus on the words that are in bold, please. Right? Focus on the words that are in bold. So one, we are always going to think about placement. Practice, it's okay if it's dead center, but we want to think about where we place our imagery when we make art. And instead of showing you a gazillion different ways to organize composition. For each lesson in drawing one, we'll focus on one or two concepts, okay? So for this artwork, we're gonna focus on visual movement. And visual movement is like that Leonardo example where we are going to place our imagery on our artwork to cause the eye to travel. So rather than getting stuck in one place or looking at one thing, we want to force the viewer to look around all of the artwork. So we're going to be creating what we call visual movement. So composition is always intentional. It's intentional, okay? So I see you guys are still writing, so I will pause for a second. If you're watching this recording, you can fast forward just a little bit. So once again, just focus on the words in bold. You don't have to write every single word out. It's okay to have bullet points here. I normally have forms for you guys to fill out, not typing, but by hand, but I didn't want to force people to have to use a printer. But I also kind of like the idea that your notes are right by your sketches so that when you're sketching, you think about, oh, I have to create visual movement, and I can create visual movement by boom, 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 boom. All those different examples that we'll go over. Okay. So I see some people are finished. I'm going to get ready to move on in just a moment here. Okay, so like I said, you can always go back to this. It's on the slides, but also I have abbreviated notes on my agenda. So I took a picture of the notes. Okay, so like Alyssa said, he uses the triangle composition to arrange. Now I want you to know you do not have to use a triangle, but 90% of the time you'll find it will happen anyway, okay? So he basically forces your eye to travel in a triangle area. And the cool thing about this is that in this, there are 4 people, but because of proximity, you know, the baby and the mother on the right side, they're kind of like grouped. That's a really fancy, like psychological phenomenon called the Gestalt. We tend to group things that are close together, right? So Leonardo did it even in the Mona Lisa and how he arranged it. He was a deeply religious and scientific man, and he believed that the number 3 was perfect. And so he would often use that to arrange his compositions. Other artists followed after Leonardo, so like us as well, we'll use him as a way of arranging our compositions, okay? This is a Caravaggio piece from the Baroque period. Does anyone see the triangle in this one? It's a little bit orientated in a slightly different way. I see some people taking their pencil and kind of drawing it. Right?
Is it from?
Yes, there you go. I'm sorry, I was too fast on that. It's upside down. So you don't have to have your triangle be like Leonardo's where there's just 1 at the top and 2 at the bottom. You could also flip it or even tilt it. And I'll show you some examples of student work that tilts it. Okay, now, number 3 is focal point. Your artwork does not need to have a focal point. We will do focal point in another artwork. However, you've probably seen this concept before, and it happens a lot in art. So often in artwork, we have an area that tends to be emphasized. It's the area that our eye tends to go, okay? So it's the thing that's emphasized. It's what's most important. And the cool thing about art is that unlike math or science, there's a number of correct answers, right? So we all bring our own personal experience, and when we look at something, we notice things for different reasons, okay? So we'll see some examples of student work that you'll be like, oh, my eye goes to this toy first, or my eye goes to this toy first. And it might be different for each of us. Okay, so this is an Edvard Munch painting, you know, the guy who did The Scream, right? And I often take time with this and kind of have people say where their eye goes. So I'm going to give you a chance. Is there anyone who's like wants to volunteer and explain where their eye goes when they look at this?
The when I look at this painting, the first thing that I see is the woman in a blue dress, how she's standing very like how she's standing really cross and kind of stands out a bit differently.
Right? And so am I pointing at her? Is it this one that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one of the reasons that my eye goes to that person is because she's making eye contact. And even through Zoom, I'm looking at the monitor. I know you don't feel like I'm making eye contact with you, but I'm looking at your pictures above my computer and I'm making eye contact with us. As humans, we naturally do that. So for some of us, that's what we're gonna notice first. Is there anyone's eye who goes somewhere different than the woman who's facing us? Does anyone else have a different focal point? Another area you're like, wow, my eye really goes there? I intentionally picked a piece that's complicated. Go ahead.
Who's sitting in the front, just kind of with her arms clasped together. She's facing down.
Yeah, a lot of people notice her because she's the biggest thing and she's got that bright red hair, right? And so a lot of times people notice her first. Is there any other places that people notice besides those two people in the front?
I noticed the chair in the back first.
Right. And so we've got this chair, and so that kind of stands out, and that's like this reddish brown, and it's like facing away for us. So there's like this sense of mystery to it. And so we're like, what is this? Right? Anything else that stands out to anyone else?
The dude in the back, like towards the left.
Right. There's one guy over here and he's like facing the wall and he seems kind of distraught. Munch, right, the screen guy, was very, like he was kind of known for doing images of people who were sick. And sadly, like this is something I show year after year after year. So I didn't even think about it with like what's going on to now, now in the news. But his family had tuberculosis when he was a child. And so his sickness was real common in his household. And so he got famous making these images about people being sick with tuberculosis. And so he kind of played it up. So this is like a very emotional piece where someone actually is getting better. And so that person getting better is in that chair. But we've got like all these different human reactions to how they feel about it. Like here, there's some sorrow, there's some relief. Some people are more stoic than others. And so it's kind of based on kind of human emotions. So this is what I want you to draw, okay? So I'm gonna have you guys, and I'm gonna switch my camera so that I can actually show you a little bit of this. So I'm gonna keep it on the big screen, but I'm just gonna do my little webcam of me. I'm gonna make myself disappear here. What I want you to do is to draw yourself a rectangle, right? Can you guys see that? I know it's probably small, right? And I want you to kind of like do a little dashed line, divide in 3 vertical, and then divide in 3 horizontally. Have you guys ever seen this before? I see it all the time on my phone.
Yeah, is it placement of thirds?
Yeah, it's on the screen. Like it says the rule of thirds, doesn't it? Something's messed up. I had this where it was a plain slide once upon a time. It wasn't animated, but that's okay. Maybe it's deleted. But with the rule of thirds, right? What you don't want to do is to put things dead center. So the X means don't put anything in the middle of your artwork. Okay? 1, that's what everyone does, and we want to be different. We're artists. Okay? We're artists, we want to be different. Okay? So if you're taking a photo or if you're making artwork, what you want to do is you want to place your main object, so your focal point, in one of these areas, right, where the grid lines cross. So those green areas are good places to put the head in a portrait or the focal point in a landscape. We don't want to put our main ideas in the center. That's what all those non-artistic people do. Now, of course, eventually we might become rule breakers and do it because it makes sense for our meaning, but we won't be doing that in drawing one. That's what my advanced students do in the future, right? So middle in the red means no, don't do that. And then the green, right, where it crosses, means that's a good place to put your imagery. So we just learned not only a drawing skill, but we learned a good photo skill here too. Alyssa, did you take photo?
I did take photo one.
Yeah. So that's a skill that I learned when I took photography as well. And I find it works really well with almost all art forms. Probably the only thing it doesn't work in is three-dimensional artworks.
Yeah, it's a really good compositional feature.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here you can see, I'm gonna zip through it. This is a Goya painting where he shifts things out of the center. Okay, so here's the directions. Go ahead and jot down these notes, right? You're going to create 3 thumbnail sketches. So 3 thumbnail sketches. I'm gonna once again switch it so that you don't see me talking, but you see my sketches. Okay, so these are my sketches for this lesson. It's not in this sketchbook because this was for when we're in school, right? So I had it in another sketchbook and I ripped it out. What's one of the things you guys notice about my sketches?
They're all like divided or like a really small kind of sketch.
Right. We're calling these thumbnail sketches because they're small. You're going to make them 3 by 4 inches. That's proportional to the 11 by 14 piece of paper we're going to use. So we're going to draw the shape our artwork will be at the end. Okay? They're small and they're super rough. Remember how we practice sketching? Sorry, talking to my son, right? See how they're really rough? Sketching is just for getting out the basic idea. We're not gonna labor and spend lots and lots of time making this perfect. This is all about getting out our ideas for arrangement, okay? Okay, we are going to include 3 views of each object, right? So in my sketch, I drew the bug 1, 2, 3 times. In the bug, I drew it 1, 2, 3 times. In this one, I drew it 1, 2, 3 times. You're going to draw your bug at least 9 times just in the sketching area, right? Just in the sketching. If you need to angle to see, you can angle. I don't need to see you writing. I just need to see that you're actively doing it, John. So feel free to get more comfortable if you need to, okay? So we're gonna do 3 different views. So you could do a top view, a bottom view, a profile, right? A combination. And so I've got my bug here. Top view would be like this, front view, bottom view, right? Profile. And then 3/4 would, or combination, is where you have it tilting at you. And this is where we're going to create a lot of movement. Can you guys see how the bug moves diagonally? Right? So you're going to think about how you can force the eye to look by changing the direction. And each time it has to be different. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to draw our object 3 different times. And then behind it, we're going to include a background, right? So your background choices are to include an interesting enlargement of a part of the object. So you might look at it and go, I really love the patterns on the wings. And so I'm going to blow that up and use that as my background. Or maybe I'm going to do a close-up of the face. Or maybe I'm going to do a close-up of the part at the bottom that says made in China, so that people know it's not a real bug, but it's a toy of a bug. Okay? You could also take something about your toy and repeat it over and over again, like wallpaper, right? So I could do a pattern of like the legs over and over and over again in my background. The other option is something that's related to your toy. So a lot of you guys, when I was looking at it, it's like, you know, I'll use an example. Someone had Super Mario Brothers. They had like Mario. You could do a logo from the game. You could do an image of Luigi, right? You could do some of the graphics of the background in the background. The key is if you're going to use a background that's not a part of the object, you have to find an image reference. We are not going to draw from our head, because once again, when we draw from our head, it's simplified, right? It's those bad symbols that we did when we did the house and the flower and the bird, okay? So we're going to make sure that we think about a clever, interesting background. You guys need more time? Want to see some examples? Let's see some examples. Okay, here's some background examples. So here's that enlargement. This one is a repeated pattern, like wallpaper. Okay, this is the related. This was a dragon book like holder. So it was like for a bookshelf. And so she has it holding books. So it's related, right? Now, these are ways that you want to create movement. So I'm going to give you some extra hints. So write these things down, right? Once again, concentrate on just the key words, right? So you can do things through leading lines. Leading lines is a fancy way of your objects have things that are linear, like the whole body shape, and you can point them to force the eye to look, right, in another direction. So like the example on the screen, look at Homer's arms, right? Look at Homer's eyes, right? Notice how they point you to the next figure. Okay, so leading lines is one way. Here's some more examples from others. These were all from last year. I added a few more. Okay. Another way you can create space is to show overlap. So I don't want you to feel like they have to be floating all by themselves. You can create a sense of depth with overlap of the figures. You don't have to even include the whole object all the time. I'd like you to include the whole object at least once. And if you're gonna do the second and third, it should be an interesting part. We wouldn't want to just say, oh, the foot is my second view, right? That we only do interesting enlargements for background. So we have to do an interesting part that's pretty complex, right? Another thing that creates movement is size variation. Our eyes will naturally travel from small to big or big to small, right? So you can make your objects all different sizes. Okay, so vary the sizes of your toys in your sketches. This one has leading lines and size variation. Notice how our eye moves in that triangle based on position and size. Right? And then vary your triangle. So you can put the triangle upside down, right? You can put the triangle on a diagonal, right? I'll go back to that other one because I moved kind of fast. So don't feel like it has to be a triangle at the top, right? Where this one point at the top, and you can also make it crooked, okay? You could also put things in a row if you wanted to. That could create movement as well. I would say the one that's kind of like that would be this one, right? This one isn't necessarily a triangle, but there's still a sense of movement because it moves across the page, okay? So you're gonna spend the rest of time today, right, working on some sketches. So in your sketchbook, go ahead and draw yourselves 3 by 4 rectangles with your ruler, okay? You can draw these sketches in horizontally or vertically, okay? I would focus on just doing one right now. And maybe what you do is you just kind of come up with some great views that you're gonna do, right? I'm gonna make mine into a horizontal. And maybe I think about, oh, I wanna do this view and this view and this view, and think about where I wanna place them first. And then you can go ahead and start sketching them in, right? We can always go in and add background after we have the main objects, okay?